Welcome to the Business of Life podcast. Don't let fear and disengagement dictate the way you run your business or your life. Revolutionize the way things are done. Innovate, effect change, find your purpose. Friends, welcome to another episode of the Business of Life podcast. Today, you're going to notice something slightly different. Here, I have a mustache, and in the video recorded for the interview, I don't. It's not some kind of trickery. I basically just didn't like the introduction I recorded for the interview, so I've re-recorded it later. And because it's November, for me it means it's Movember, so obviously the Mo's in full swing. But it's a great interview, and it's one that I wanted to do a bit better service on for the introduction, so I just had to re-record it. Today we're talking to a guy who is, he does everything. I mean, he's a rapper. He's a creative consultant, he's a philosopher, he's a theologian, he's a preacher, he's a poet. He's a guy that carries a great message, and he has a lot of people that he leads. So I think, God, this interview goes everywhere. It covers so much ground. But if you lead anyone or you have influence over other people, or there's things that, you know, you have kind of big dreams on your heart, then this is a great one for you to listen to. Please welcome with me, Joshua Luke Smith.
Hey, mate, thank you very much for having me. Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. Honored to be here.
Josh, I just wanted to share with you, kind of before we start, of why I thought you would be the ideal first person to get on this podcast. Like, this is primarily going to be a business podcast, and think quite a practical resource just to help people figure out how they can revolutionize the way they're not only doing life, but business and treating customers and employees. But it's something I believe, and I know that you definitely believe as well, that for any real sustained change to happen and to be able to revolutionize anything out there, the change needs to first happen in here. And you can see it quite easily with, you know, your stuff that you've done with your Heart Before Art and your TED talk on dealing with, let me get it right. I always get it muddled up. Getting to the heart of the matter by dealing with matters of the heart. That's right.
There you go. There you go, bro.
Yeah. So I was wondering, like, to start with, how'd you get on that journey of finding this as like a message that you carry?
Yeah, good question. Well, my background is growing up in a missionary household, which basically means my parents took me and my sisters out at a very young age. I think I was 2 years old, to a area in rural northern Pakistan where my dad built a hospital, and they worked in the most kind of impoverished area, working with people whose lives were very difficult, and they put themselves in the way of poverty and injustice to really help change people's lives. And so those were my formative years, and I grew up around it, and in turn basically got a thirst for continuing that kind of work in wanting to make a difference, wanting to make a change. And you know, I'm sure everyone listening to this relates to that. You wake up in the morning, and in your heart of hearts, you want to make a change. You want to do something different. And so it was actually, I was in my early 20s, and I remember first hearing about the reality of modern slavery, something I thought had been dealt with in the 19th, 18th century, but then realized the horrific reality of the slave trade. And so, okay, I went on the journey. I was like, well, I want to make a change. How can I impact people's lives? How can I help the women, children, men in slavery? And I went on this journey that basically, it made me realize this, and it kind of goes into sort of the business conversation, but a product is really useful when there's a demand for it, you know? And when there's no longer a demand, the product really doesn't have its place in the market anymore. And what I realized was the only reason there's a slave trade, the only reason that there's literally an economy based upon the trafficking of human for sexual exploitation is because in the heart of mankind, there's a demand. So if we can deal with the origin of the supply chain, then we can get rid of the product, you know? And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put my efforts into that work. And the difficult thing is that you got to begin with yourself. Yeah. So I had to go on this journey, which was like, in what way, and this sounds a little crazy, but in what way does the way I look at the world, I treat women, I view sexuality, in what way could that be, you know, propping up the slave trade? This sounds so crazy, but unless you make it particular and you make it about yourself, you really can't be a part of lasting change. So, yeah, I mean, supply chains. That's how I got onto it.
Yeah, man, it's so true. It kind of reminds me of Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, where he talks about spending that much time in concentration camps from the Germans and into the Russians, and then just has the foresight to kind of look at how am I contributing to what's happening today,
Right.
What kind of minute detail? Because when you think of the problem as, slavery and that kind of sex trade is huge.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what am I really doing to contribute? When you start to look at all the decisions you're making day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see over time.
Absolutely. And it's not easy. It's something that I found has been very easy to say, and it's much harder to live it out. And so, I mean, there's so much that comes with that about the daily interrogation of self, looking at yourself each day and saying, in what ways do I play a role in the injustices of the earth, and how can I avoid that?
Yeah, and I guess that is such a it's a tough insight to have, but also very necessary. And it reminds me of something you said. I think it was in your TED talk. You were talking about how, I guess, in the society we live in today, in this age, never has perfectionism and that being so prevalent. We have this facade we put forward of the kind of, your digital facade, especially that most people see in the world. And then you have the reality of how you actually are. And I guess you have the same thing when you have this ideal of what you want to be like. And then you have where you're actually at, but you're trying to put forward, this is how I actually am in the world without living it. And that creates a lot of anxiety and tension.
Yeah.
I reckon a lot of people, especially kind of leaders and people who will be listening to this podcast, entrepreneurs, people who want to make a difference and a change, they want to do it, but they have this, idea and concept that they should probably already be there, they should be further along. They're putting out an image that they don't quite live up to a lot of the time. And I think a lot of people experience it as probably unique to them, that no one else has really gone through this. But you're someone who's, you've been alongside and gone through many, dealings of people from all walks of life and leaders, especially in business and other areas. Can you speak to kind of any kind of trends or commonalities that you've seen in that side of the human experience?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's funny. The other night, Karen, my wife, and I watched the Truman Show, and I think most people have watched it. If you haven't, go and watch it. But the concept, in a sentence, is a man who's living his life normally, like we all are, without realizing that he's actually living in a totally made up world. His every move being projected around the earth. It's a TV show, and there's a scene at the end, if you remember, where he goes out sailing and he hits this wall, which is basically the stage, right? And he realizes, oh my goodness, everything I've believed to be true was a lie. And I watched it and I thought, wow, that is so true for all of us. We all, in one way or another, live in our own Truman shows. We live in this kind of custom built fantasy of who we are and what we do, and we project it. But this is what's true about a human experience. The boat will hit the wall at some point. At some point, it will happen. It's actually one of the only things we can be absolutely certain about as a human is death. Not to kind of deep dive already, Hanan, but it's true. At some point, that's going to happen. So for anyone who's leading anyone to do so outside of the context that at some point the facade crashes down is going to be very difficult to sustain. So the longer that you lead without authenticity, the harder it is going to be to maintain it. The bigger the lie becomes. And I'm seeing it's an incredible revolution right now in leadership with the work of people like Dr. Brené Brown and other people like that who are exposing the human need for authenticity. And I think gone are the days, the sort of 80s, 90s, early 2000s, gone are the days where, you impress your subordinates or the people that follow you through the car you drive and the suit you wear. Now, the thirst for authenticity is unparalleled. It's unmatched. And, as you said at the beginning, a lot of the work I do is in spirituality. And I draw a lot of wisdom from the story of Jesus. So whether or not you've grown up around that tradition or not, doesn't matter. But there's a scene. I'll just tell this story, Hanan, and you can move on. But at the very end of the life of Jesus, he's been leading a group of men for 3 years, and at the very end of his life, he's immensely distressed. He knows that the next day will be his death, and what he decides to do, instead of disassociating himself from his followers in the midst of his distress, he brings them into it, and he allows them to see him weeping and in anguish. Effectively, he allows them to see the collapse of their own leader. And I've always thought that's such a powerful leadership principle, where you can only take people where you've been, and you can only really lead people that trust you. Yeah. So as soon as you begin to allow expression of vulnerability, authenticity, and fragility in your life, as soon as you begin to allow that appropriately, and there's a lot we could talk about in terms of the practicalities of it, but as you allow yourself to do that, the bonds of trust within your team will strengthen.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I can think of so many examples. There's one guy, I can't remember his name or what the company was, but they're a German manufacturing company, and they were big, but they weren't along the industry leaders at all. And they had they're a multinational, but they had their annual meeting of all the directors in the company. Mm. And the CEO got up there, and he was a guy that was known as, he'd started the company from scratch, and he was quite a taskmaster and had his kind of a hardline vision that everyone needed to follow. And he went up there, and he usually gives an address of the performance of the company and how things are going. And this one year, he just went up there, and he's like, I can't carry on doing what I've been doing.
What?
There's huge gaps in how I run this company. I don't have all the insight. I micromanage too much. I need your guys' input.
Wow.
And I know I've been controlling how things are going for such a long time, but it needs to stop. But I don't know how to do it on my own. I need you guys to help me. And apparently it took a lot of the managers back because they weren't expecting anything like that. And I think the company within the next couple of years after that, they've been running for, decades before that, went up to be the third or fourth largest manufacturer in Germany. They had a huge, huge explosion, wow. Largely because a lot of people that were following him felt more liberated to actually try and innovate where they hadn't done before.
Yeah. And there you go.
And I think that's largely part of it as well, is so I think if you run in circles where people are, the conversation around vulnerabilities more common and you're used to it, and you kind of have that space where you're allowed to try and fail, it's a bit easier. But when you're not, and you're kind of you can see it in a lot of corporate world where you've got your corporate friends, and it's all just about, who gets the promotion, what you're earning, what you're driving.
Yeah.
Having that risk where you could lose that status, that's quite a big risk to take. And it's a lot of things that people don't want to step out of. There's definitely something I want to encourage people to be able to do.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, as much as authenticity and vulnerability is, and you can look at the data. If you read Brené Brown's books, what's so powerful about them is it's quantified data. It's proven vulnerability and authenticity create good results. It's proven it's the right thing to do. One, it doesn't make it easy. And two, for many of us, we weren't given roadmaps for it. So I didn't grow up, I don't know about you, Hanan, but I didn't grow up in a household where where my dad was vulnerable. I've never seen my dad cry. I've never seen my dad especially vulnerable. I have later in life. So often we're throwing out big phrases like vulnerability, authenticity, and they're the destinations, but we don't have a compass or a roadmap to get there. And so that's why I think it's so daunting. So I think it's really important that, honestly, I know it's said so much, but we just begin having conversations. So perhaps before you stand up and declare something vulnerably in front of your whole team, you do it with the person next to you, someone closest to you, and you just begin a culture where you allow yourself to start figuring out the map. Oh, okay, actually, that terrain isn't as devastating as I thought it might be. Yeah. I'll go a little further down it,
Yeah, because it's definitely, there's a saying I love, which I think will run through this podcast a lot, that failure isn't fatal. And a lot of the times you get there and it's not as bad a result as you think it will be. The pain's there definitely, but it doesn't last for anywhere near as long.
Yeah.
And it is so nice when you have those spaces where you can actually just open up and talk to people. Like I have a couple of my friends who have got their own companies now, and that's what we conversate with each other. We'll have that space where we can actually talk about what we're worried about doing in the companies, the hard conversations we're not having, the things you just fall back on doing. And it's powerful when you get it out there.
Yeah, you're right, mate. Those spaces are so important. Mate. Finding people, I like using this phrase, finding people with your measure. So again, I'm going to probably keep digging back into sort of spiritual principles, but there's a story that Jesus told us about. God gives to everyone a different portion, a different measure, a different capacity. And I found in my journey that if I speak vulnerably or I share things to someone who doesn't have my capacity, it can be devastating. And it's really important to find people who are a similar measure capacity. Are they able to carry the same kind of weight that you do? Do they lead people? Leadership isn't something that everyone's cut out for. Not everyone's meant to be a leader, and thank God. That's really good, But if you are a leader, and if you find yourself leading a team, it's critical that you're in relationship with other people who are, so that you can have these, off-the-record conversations about all the idiosyncrasies of being a leader, It's huge. If you don't have that now, find it. It won't come to you. You have to seek it out. You have to be the first person to break the ground and build those kind of conversations with other friends in those kind of positions.
Too true. So Josh, that would lead me to a question which I think I'll ask everyone who comes on here. In the spirit of being vulnerable and not looking at failure too dimly, do you have any good stories of where you've failed, either professionally or personally, that you'd like to tell us?
Totally. I mean, I'll dive straight in. I think, the last 10 years I've spent building basically a community, an organization that seeks to create art for the purpose of bringing redemption, bringing stories that are redemptive into the public sphere, into the forefront of society. I truly believe in the impact of art on society and its ability to transform culture and move culture forward. And my last 10 years, honestly, are just decorated with failure, decorated with debt, decorated with, projects that I thought were going to bring in cash flow, that I thought were going to take us to the next level, that absolutely didn't. And in the midst of all that, I'm also an artist myself. And so, honestly, and I can't tell you how many stories I've got of hitting the stage at times, either speaking or performing, and just like knowing I'm going to crush it and just feeling prepared. And within minutes of being up there, realizing that, I've forgotten what I'm going to say. I've forgotten a lyric half the way through, and it's unredeemable. Sometimes it's redeemable. There's times that have been completely, absolutely, irrevocable, unredeemable. There was one time I was in Liverpool and I was doing a show for the Liverpool University, who had flown in people from all around the world, because Liverpool had been named the city of culture for Europe. They'd all come in and they invited me to come up. The Vice Chancellor invited me to come up and perform for the final night of this huge event they had put on. So representations from substantial universities all across the world. Bruv, I got up and 5 lines into the poem on the closing night, at the climax of this event, I forgot my words. I forgot what I was going to, and I'd already invoiced, like I was staying over, like I was getting paid, and I thought, what do you do? And honestly, mate, I've got stories where I was able to redeem it. I didn't. I failed. I failed in one of the only things that I've ever really believed I'm good at, I failed in the very thing I'm trying to carve a career out doing. And it was unredeemable. Yeah. I muffled a few other sentences. I wrapped it up in the most kind of patched up way I could. And then I walked back to my seat with my head hanging low and, had to process that, had to deal with it. I've created quite a few different companies, some which have done relatively well, some which are, really adding to my wife and I's life, and some which have just added huge amounts of debt, have meant that I've gone to bed at 2:00 in the morning for most nights in a week, and, and yielded no fruit, So my 20s have have been decorated with failure.
With something like the Liverpool thing, a lot of people would kind of see that as, almost like a knockout blow, like, oh, maybe I'm not cut out for this. I should.
Yeah.
How do you kind of go through the process of picking yourself up after something like that, or just being able to take some kind of lesson from it? What's your process with that?
Well, I think part of it for me has been acknowledging that it happened, right? Like sitting in it and staying in it. I have a personality type that is prone to sort of the avoidance of really acknowledging pain and embarrassment and just trying to like move past it, like many of us. But honestly, bro, what has grown in me is that happened, sitting in the hotel room afterwards and actually replaying it in my mind. Now, not for the sake of condemnation or shame. Shame and guilt are two different things. Guilt is when you know you've done something wrong. Shame is when you believe you are something wrong. And shame has no place in my life. That isn't to say I don't deal with it. I'm saying it adds no benefit to me as a human being, as a leader, as a pastor, as a husband. It doesn't do anything good for me. But replaying a moment where failure has been present, honestly, allows me, like a engineer, digging into why didn't this engine run well? Like, what was it? Like, I don't want that to happen again. And I'm not going to submit to the lie of shame, which says, bro, you're out. So if it's true that I'm still in the game, I need to learn how to make sure that doesn't happen again,
Yeah.
So in my finances, we've had to really go through our finances and say, okay, we're going to start something new, or we're going to continue this venture. How do we make sure that we don't get into debt again? Let's analyze it. Let's really look at it. And one thing I will say, Bray, is I have a mantra every time I get off stage, and it's this: you are loved and you belong. Every time I get off stage, whether it's in front of 10,000 people and it's going really well, whether in front of it's 50 people and I've absolutely bottled it, I'm still loved.
Yeah.
Right? Whether you're listening to this podcast and you have any kind of spirituality or not, I bet that I can find someone in your life who loves you, even if it's your mom, right? Someone loves you. Someone loves you not because you're leading a team or because you're a great poet. You're loved, and it has nothing to do with what you do, and you belong. And, that's what we're really in search for, is belonging. And if I can go on stage and leave stage believing that I'm loved and that I belong, then that whatever happens in between those two manifestos or mantras isn't final. Like you said, it isn't fatal.
Yeah. I think that's like a lot of it, like love and belonging are two of our most fundamental human needs that we always strive for. And definitely at some point earlier in our life, we'll learn, rightly or wrongly, how that's kind of given and received, usually from our parents. Like you always have that thing, if I do something good, I seem to get more loved, or if I'm at school and I do something, the friends seem to like me more and I seem to be more belong there. And a lot of those, I think those beliefs we hold, and they get quite deep and they carry through into our adult life. And because I guess a lot of our work becomes a huge part of our identity, then you have like this added complex on top where if you fail in the workspace, the impact of losing those things possibly will be even larger. And I think that's where you get a lot of people that, if they haven't grown up with a framing of failure being something that's acceptable, then taking the risk to do something different where you might fail becomes like paralyzing, and they just don't move. I love the story of, terrible with names today, the CEO of Spanx, the lady who created it.
Okay.
Her name, but she has the story of when she was growing up, around the dinner table every night, her dad used to always ask the kids, how did you fail today? And she was like, it was never a condemning thing. It was always like a moment of pride, because he's like, if you're failing, you're trying to do something that hasn't been done, and that's what we want. We want to keep trying to push and push and push the envelope. And if you're staying safe, you're not going to fail, and that's not where we want to be.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's such a great message to have, and like a perspective to have. And I know companies like Google, I think they have it in their quarterly reviews, where they'll go with, especially their kind of product development and their other development teams, where the managers will look at how they've failed. And if they haven't failed, they kind of get marked down almost, because they know they're not trying to innovate as well then. So their motto almost is like fail early and fail early pretty much, because it's not going to be as big or as devastating, but just keep trying to push the envelope early on. And
that's good.
For you and kind of everything you've dealt with the people you've worked with, for people who are listening, you know, people who are leading a company or are starting that process of leading people, would you have any kind of advice going forward for them that you would share?
In terms of leading people?
Yeah, like just this kind of this process of like, you know, setting forward something that's innovative and revolutionary. Like if you want to really change something in the workspace.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I think for me, in the teams that I lead, my clear objective is vision and culture. And that's my responsibility as a leader in areas that we're trying to pioneer. I have a team meeting every Monday where the team gathers, and the team that I lead, when I sit in that seat, what I'm there to give them is vision and culture. There's an old Hebrew proverb that says, where there is no vision, the people throw off restraint. So where there isn't vision, discipline begins to kind of like deconstruct, fade away. So as a leader, it's critical that I get to Monday morning every week with vision and with an implementing and a reaffirming of our culture. Because I'm a good leader, I'm not a good manager. And that's something that's really been helpful for me to realize and might be helpful for people listening to this. Are you a leader or are you a manager? And this is what I mean by the difference. Someone who can lead is often someone who's really good at casting vision. Someone who's good at managing is often really good at seeing that vision at work, you know? So looking at my personality, I can say I'm really good at starting things. I'm not brilliant at finishing things, but there's a lot of people who are. And so if I can keep a space where they feel inspired and encouraged to finish the task at hand, then I'm doing my job. I'm not here to do their job. I'm here to do my job. And often as a leader, that means allowing people to be way better than you at what they do and not trying to get a credit for it. Let them do it. Let them shine. Give them space. That's another thing, mate. Two things about space. One, if you want to have vision, you need to have space to see where you're going in a way others can't, right? So if my responsibility in my week is to create space. So for example, this afternoon, I took 4 hours out. Now it's in my working day, but I call it margins. So, you know, you open up a book and there should be nice thick margins around the words. That's how my life needs to look. I need to have space around the margins to make notes on what's in the middle. If I don't, then I can't take anyone anywhere. So I took 4 hours out today to do what? To see, to look, you know, to see where are we going? Like, what is next? Walt Disney, I love what he did. Before there was Disneyland, he just created what he called the Imagineers, where he just created a space for people to try things. He said, I want us to see what tomorrow looks like in a way no one else can. And they came up with Disneyland. They came up with this place of like, well, what if we built a town and it actually brought people into our creations? That was only there because he paid the salaries of a group of people to just, what can you see? So basically, as a leader, if you're there to give people vision, you need to create space to see. And if you're there to build culture, you have to live it out. You have to live out the culture. Culture is people watch culture. You can't teach culture; they watch it happen. You know what I mean? And Chris Anderson talks about it in his book about doing the perfect TED talk, where he talks about tribal leaders. You know, like leadership and the way that tribes conveyed culture was through watching. It wasn't like, here's my book on the culture. Do you do it? What is the culture around the most basic forms of living, about hunting, about hygiene? What do you do, you know? And so as a leader, I'm accountable to, am I living up the culture that I'm telling others to? And bruv, that's where it gets humbling. I'm doing something with my team at the moment where they're going to be giving me 360 feedback on who I am as a leader, which is, it will be anonymous, but I know it's going to be so humbling, man. And for me, it's a review of, do I live out what I'm trying to create here for everyone else?
I think that's such an important thing for especially leaders to have that insight that you have blind spots that you can't see, and you need other people around you who are, well, one, actually willing to tell you, but you're willing to listen to what they're telling you.
Yes.
Because if you do, you just otherwise you just stay on your own narrow path and you never see how you can improve. Yeah. Hey,
yeah, that's
brilliant.
it.
Words of wisdom indeed. Oh, Josh, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Before you go, can you tell everyone how they can find you, how they can contact you?
Yeah, there's this little known app. It's just kind of beginning to surface called Instagram. I'm one of the first people on it. I'm pioneering this platform. But if you want to get me on Instagram's the new everything. So you can hit me up on Instagram, Joshua Luke Smith, joshualukesmith.com. Throw that name into YouTube, Google, and you can see some of the work I'm doing.
That's right. And are we expecting any exciting new things from you coming up?
Well, I'll tell you what, bro. I have a daughter who's going to be born any day. So that's my latest project. And there's certain things in the works, but I'm going to let them go on pause for a bit and learn how to do the leadership of fathering, which is, I hear it's its own unique task. So I'm going to go on that journey.
Oh, yeah. Your time management will get put to the test, that's for sure.
That's it, yeah. Those 4-hour margins are going to be tested.
Yeah. Well, mate, we look forward to talking to you again. And best of luck with baby Eden.
Appreciate it, man.
See you soon. Thanks for watching. If you want to join the revolution, follow and subscribe here. And if you want to revolutionize the way your business and your life is run, then contact us to find out more about our consulting and coaching packages. You can contact us via email, admin@hustonconsultants.co.uk.